Let's move on to Leipzig. Done a really interesting piece of business yesterday. Today is Tuesday, Monday. They signed Arthur Vermeeren from Atletico Madrid. It's a really interestingly structured deal. I have these numbers confirmed. 20 million euros is the obligation to buy, which will be triggered after a certain amount of games. The loan fee is 3 million. So I've been more or less told that this deal will be probably made permanent during the first half of the season. So it's a very low number of games that need to be played for the Vermeeren deal to become permanent. I think this is probably just an accounting thing, Stefan, to ensure that this doesn't fall into the summer. It falls into next year or the winter, and then Leipzig can kind of round up the numbers or change the numbers wherever they need to make them fit, right? Essentially, this is the short-term Haber-Schlager replacement who's still out with an injury, right? The central midfielder were highly touted. Leverkusen also was in on him. They lost out. I think a bunch of Bundesliga clubs already tried to sign him last summer when he did originally join Atletico Madrid for around 20 million euros, I think the fee was at the time. 19 years old. I mean, this is a player with a ton of upside. And I think Leipzig's business keeps on impressing me. They got Nusa, who had an instant impact, right, on match day one. Vermeeren is now there to show up the midfield. They still have Asano Draogo as well, the young German midfielder. They didn't lose any significant pieces, which is a first in a really long time. It almost feels like they just added and added and added. And, in a lot of ways, that feels kind of familiar than Leverkusen's transfer window last summer.
Yeah, it's Leverkusen 101, isn't it? It's the most Leverkusen deal that they've potentially done this summer. They've done quite a lot of... Sorry, not Leverkusen, Leipzig. They've done many Leipzig kind of deals this summer. He's a really interesting young player. I'm not going to pretend to say that I've watched him extensively, obviously, since he spent most of his time playing in, Belgium, and then half a season, really, in La Liga. Very, very little game time in La Liga. But from what I can tell, he seems like a very, very smart kind of number 6 or number 8 kind of holding midfielder, or maybe even box-to-box midfielder. His defensive stats were actually really impressive at Antwerp, which is perhaps quite something that's worth noting, but also he really shone in his key passes as well. So he's a player who's very good at breaking up opposition plays, but he's also a player who's very good at setting up plays, which suggests to me that he's got the kind of building blocks to become a very, very good number 8. Yeah, I'll be interested to see how long he has to wait before he get game time, because, that kind of central midfield position is one that's at Leipzig that, isn't bad by any means, but it's perhaps kind of overlooked at times. And it's a position that's kind of dominated by a lot of kind of older heads in that team. Maybe that's by design, because they obviously have a habit of signing very young defenders, very young wingers, very young strikers. But, you go through that midfield and you've got Schlager there, obviously. You have Haidara, you have Kevin Campbell. I mean, those are 3 elder statesmen of RB Leipzig Football Club. You don't really get much more experience when it comes to Leipzig players. But they've obviously brought in a lot of younger players as well. They've got Siva, they've got Drago, who you obviously spoke to this summer, who can play in a number of positions. But you then kind of put the two of them alongside Vermeeren, and you've kind of got a midfield trio there of 3 players who are very, very young. And, we didn't really get to see a huge amount of Siva out last season, but I thought what we did see showed glimpses of a player who could develop into an excellent young player. Obviously, Drago comes with a huge amount of kind of buzz around him. And then Vermeeren as well, who, as you said, is only 19, is a potential, star in that Leipzig team. So it'll be interesting to see how Marco Rose kind of balances all this, because you've basically got 3 older, experienced players and 3 very hungry, very talented, very promising central midfielders as well. So 6 players for 3 positions, or maybe even 2 positions most weeks. So it'll be interesting to see who gets game time.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, I think a lot of it will depend on how long Schlager is out, right? But you need that depth for the Champions League as well. There's more Champions League group stage matches this year, right? So you need that depth there as well. So yeah, it's so interesting. I just think it's fascinating how Leipzig have added a lot of talent and depth to a side, because usually we talk about them losing 5-6 different players every summer, and that just hasn't happened. Other than Olmo, no one's really gone. So it is fascinating in that regard.